Hi, everybody. Welcome back. This is part 2 of our twofer day. We are doing another episode of the Pages Promotions Virtual Book Festival. All throughout the month of June, we are introducing people to independent authors and their books because we're not allowed to do book festivals in person the way we're accustomed. So we're trying to do it this way and bridge the gap. Today, we have Marie LePres with us. Hey, Marie.
Hello.
And of course, we're going to get to the pseudonym question in a minute, but let's start at the beginning. So Marie's book is Though War Shall Rise Against Me. I keep wanting to make that through instead of though. So I'd love it if you could give us a brief synopsis of the book, pretty please.
Yeah. So this book, The War Shall Rise Against Me, it's about 4 young women and their experiences throughout the entire Civil War. And they live in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, which if you know anything about the Civil War, even a little bit, you've probably at least heard of Gettysburg. It was one of the biggest battles.
Sure.
And so it's about 4 young women, and they all kind of come from different walks of life, but they're all still friends. And so it kind of just shows what life was like for the civilians throughout the entire war, not just during the battle either, but before, during, and after it. So.
Okay. Now, when you say that these women come from different walks of life, how do you categorize that?
For
me, a different walk of life would be somebody who's affluent as opposed to somebody who's poor. Is that what you're doing there, or are there different categories? Hey, Andrew.
Oh yeah, like that's definitely, hey. So that's definitely part of it. So one of the main characters, and her character links it to other books in the series, which we'll get to in a second. So she's a farm girl, lives right outside of the city, or out of the town. And then one of the main character, and so she's kind of like in that middle class. And then one of the characters, I've got images of the back of the book.
Snazzy.
What I like, what I like to do
hold
is
up the images.
Okay. What I like to do in, especially the books in this series, is take actual historic figures and tie them together with characters that I've created. And so at least one main character in each of my main books in the series, one of those main characters is an actual person, and then I kind of take their story and build around it. And so Jenny Wade is well known in Gettysburg for certain reasons, which I won't go into because of spoilers, but she her family was poor. Her family was very much looked down upon. Her father was in prison, and so they definitely were at the bottom. A third character in the book is Alexander Sadler, and her father is a fairly prominent professor at one of the colleges in the town, and she's a fictional character. And then the final character is also fictional, and she is a young woman who actually is initially from South Carolina, but she married a young man from Gettysburg, so she's a newlywed. And so she has actually moved up to live with his family. So you get that kind of perspective as well.
Okay, so would this be classified as creative nonfiction? Because you're taking so much historical fiction and you're kind of filling in the gaps with fiction, right? You're taking the history and filling in some of the unknown stuff, or are you just using the history as a platform and then infusing it with your own imagination?
I do consider it historic fiction. Everything in here could have happened, but I do take a lot of artistic license with what's in between, as well as building the other characters up as well.
Okay. Why the Civil War? 4 really brutal years of American history. What made you want to write about Gettysburg and about this particular time in history?
So for some reason, I've always been really interested in the Civil War. It's just something that's always kind of captured my attention. And years ago, I was still in college. My family, we took a field trip, or not field trip, teacher brain still on sometimes.
Yeah, I get it.
We took a vacation, and we stopped in Gettysburg and just really learned a lot about the people there and the civilians and the individuals, and heard the story of Jenny Wade, and I wanted to know more about it. And in learning more about her and learning more about her story, there wasn't a whole lot of fiction. And fiction is mostly what I read. In fact, the only nonfiction that I read is for classes in school, professional development, or professional development, or to research the books. And so I just thought that maybe there should be a little bit more fiction from that civilian perspective and from the perspective of the individuals who weren't necessarily fighting, but whose lives were very much affected by the war.
Okay. Where did you go for your research? And piggybacked on that, what was the most unusual piece of research you found, or the most unusual factoid you found while on your research journey?
So researching, first and foremost, I actually visit the cities and the towns that the books take place in. And that kind of really gives me a visual. I'm a very visual learner, very visual person. And so that's always a big piece to start off with. And then from there, I look at a lot of journals and diaries and letters that people have written. So a lot of primary sources, as well as nonfiction books as well, to kind of to get that idea. There's been a lot of interesting pieces, and just kind of through researching and through learning about, the first book really sent me on a journey with the rest of the books as well. Just how much people had to endure during that time, and what they had to do and what they had to go through, and how they were able to get through that. A lot of them relied heavily on faith, and that's a big piece of their lives. It's a big piece of my life as well. And so, that just kind of that pretty consistent piece where, they rely on faith, family, and friendships. And one of my sisters, who has no interest in history at all whatsoever, read the book just because, hey, my sister wrote a book, I should probably read it.
Well, that's supportive.
Oh, very supportive. Yeah. But then she actually said, I was expecting something completely different, but I really liked it because it was about family and friendships and relationships and faith and things like that. It's just set in a different time period with different, events coming at them. So,
sure.
We are a lot like those individuals.
Yeah, humanity doesn't change tremendously over the years, but it's just the circumstances, I think, that change more than the people. At the core, I think people have pretty much stayed the same over thousands of years, really, no matter how far you go back. Anybody else have any questions for Marie? I don't want to, again, monopolize the situation here.
How many books are there?
So in this series, there's 4 full-length books, and there is a prequel novella. The character that I mentioned in this first book, the young woman from South Carolina who married the young man from Pennsylvania, a lot of people wanted to know more about them and their relationship. And since I already had all their backstory in my head, I just put together that novella. And that's actually, I was just looking, that's the one book that I do not have.
Do you have that handy
right now?
Oh, you don't?
I do not have that. I don't have it in front of me right now.
What's the title of that novella?
So that is called, oh my goodness, drawing.
You wrote that, right?
I did. Oh my goodness. Wherever you go.
Okay.
So yeah, wherever you go. I can't believe it took me that long to think of it.
Okay. How long ago did you write that prequel?
The prequel's been out probably 5-6 years now.
Okay, you're forgiven. Okay, so tell us about the other books that you've written, the ones that you have on hand, so you can show us the covers, because I only have the one.
Okay, so I've got obviously the first one, The War Shall Rise Against Me, and one of the main characters in that book is Charlotte Turner, and so she has cousins, and so it's kind of a unique series in that way because they don't go chronologically. You can actually read them in any order or a standalone, but they're all linked by this fictional Turner family. Okay. And you do get to know, so in the first book, you get to know Charlotte's cousins through letters and through some flashbacks. But then other books are about them. So the second one, even though you could read it in any order, is Be Strong and Steadfast. And this one takes place in Fredericksburg, Virginia. And then we've got Vicksburg, Mississippi, Plans for a Future of Hope. So it's from the cousins that are a little bit further west. And then we've got Plans for a Future of Hope, which takes place in Petersburg, Virginia.
Now, are all of these books, do they all take place during the Civil War, during that 4-year period?
Yes, they do. So you kind of, you would get through one and then you kind of start all over again in 1861.
From a different perspective.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay. Are they all about the Gettysburg area, or do they take? So they take place, like you said, Virginia and some other places. So I guess what I'm asking is the main focus that battle in Gettysburg throughout the whole series, or do you have other battle focuses?
Yeah, and that was actually one way that I could pick these different settings. So the first book is Gettysburg. The second book, it all takes place in, like I said, Fredericksburg, Virginia. So you hear about the Battle of Gettysburg, but it is mostly about Fredericksburg, which was actually right between Richmond, Virginia and Washington, D.C. So there was actually quite a lot of conflict that went through right there. They were under occupation by one army or the other quite a bit. And so
look
that
what
one focuses.
Andrew's got.
Pardon?
Andrew, look what Andrew's got. He's got a book. See?
Oh yeah, there it is. There it is. He's so good about that.
He is. He's great about that. You're awesome, Andrew.
So yeah, so like the second book, it is purely Fredericksburg, Virginia, and still again 4 young women. One of them, Kate Corbin, is the main character in that one, who actually did live through all those things, and she has an extremely tragic story. My mom's read the book probably 5 or 6 times, and she still cries. So yeah, there's definitely some emotions. And then, like I said, this one takes place in Fredericksburg or Vicksburg, Mississippi. So it really it focuses on Vicksburg, Mississippi. Their kind of claim to fame, you might call it, is the 47-day siege, where the people were just kind of trapped in the city and they could not go anywhere. I kind of have a little bit more empathy for them after, the 3 months of quarantine.
After COVID,
but theirs was so much worse because they're actually constantly being bombarded, and they had to live in caves and, had to resort to eating some things that you would not want to eat. So that really focuses on that. And then the last one, again, purely Petersburg, Virginia, really just focusing on what life was like for people in that area. They're just south of Richmond, so there was a lot there as well.
Okay, so let me ask you this. Are all the books written first person and from a female protagonist viewpoint?
All third person, but written in the
person.
female protagonist, yeah.
Okay, so this is a unique series because so much of our history of that time period is written either from a soldier's point of view or from a man's point of view. There's very little that came out of that time period that was the stories of women. So I think it's great that you're giving women a voice during that time period.
Yeah, and once I started digging, and once I was able to talk to some actual historians, we do mostly hear about the soldiers and the politicians, but it was actually really cool to get my hands on some diaries of the women and some letters of the women to really get that perspective too. That was another reason that I really want to do that, because you do mostly hear about the soldiers and politicians, and so this talks more about those civilians.
Right. No, I think it's nice that you're offering a different voice perspective for that time period, because even the television programs we see on the History Channel or the Discovery Channel, they're primarily from a male point of view. So this is a different thought process, I think. Women have different priorities than men do at a time of war. So I think it would be a really interesting read.
Yeah.
Does anybody else have anything for Marie? Again, I don't want to overstep. I hate that when I have to do stuff. Andrew, you're a smart guy. Do you have questions? Yeah, Andrew, you are a smart guy. I don't care how much you want to.
I am not smart.
Yeah. Yeah, funny man.
No, I have no questions. I enjoyed, I mean, I enjoyed the point of view. I also enjoyed talking to her when talking to you
Yeah.
in this corner over here. So, no, I think it's really interesting that several of the Michigan authors, several of the area authors have written about the Civil War from the woman's point of view. I know, I think 4 that I have the books for that have written not from the traditional point of view that here's the guy going to fight, but more from what people had to go through to survive,
Yeah.
whether it be fiction or nonfiction. You know, I'm curious. I'm always curious, and as I look through, it's always interesting to me how people, where they get their sources for history, especially the Civil War, which has a very diverse history depending upon which sources you use. On one hand, you have the traditional sources which see what was going on at the time. At the other hand, we're faced with a similar problem today, where you had Lincoln having troops telling people who to vote for at polls, which most people don't know until they really dig into history. So, you know, it's real interesting reading through and getting different people's point of view from a time that the winners wrote the history. So you really have to dig to find the others. But no, what I missed the first few minutes. I'm sorry, I was lost in a moment. But what are you working on now? Where are you?
Oh, yeah, and I've got a lot of different things. From that, you know, in addition, so the very first book, Gettysburg, I teach I teach at a Catholic school, and so it's a preschool through 8th grade building, and I focus on, I'm in the middle school. And so I had, my first book came out, my first couple books came out, and my middle schoolers can read them. They're geared toward adults, but they are appropriate for middle schoolers, and I wrote them with that in mind. But the younger kids, it's a smaller school, so you really get to know all the kids, and the other kids are like, Miss Emelander, you need to write a book for us. So these are like the 3rd, 4th, 5th graders. So from that, I actually have a middle grade novel.
Okay.
Sammy's,
Really?
yeah, so that's Sammy's Struggle. So that kind of reaches
Hold that up again. Hold that up
Yes,
again.
hold that up again. It looks just like me.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. That actually, we had an older cover and it was not nearly as good. And I was down in Gettysburg with my mom, who helps manage and do just about everything other than write. And we wanted to get a new cover, and that young man just was right there, and it was awesome. It was kind of a perfect opportunity.
You know, always frightens me a little bit when Andrew leaves his seat, because I'm never sure what's going to happen when he comes back.
Where's he going?
I know.
And then actually too, primarily teaching middle school, and wanted to go off kind of in a different direction as well with some books. I actually have another 4-book series that I'm halfway through. So this is the Key to Mackinac series, because Mackinac is a place extremely near and dear to my heart. And so this is my young adult novel. There's time travel in this one.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Andrew, you're right. It's you. The hat, definitely. Yeah. Yeah. So show us your Mackinac series.
So this is Beyond the Fort. This is the first one. And it follows a young woman in high school, Christine, who works at Colonial Michilimackinac, and she actually finds a key that takes her back in time to 1775, and kind of starts her on a journey. She meets another young man who had actually disappeared from Mackinac City 3 years prior, so now she knows what happened to him. And then they kind of run into an evil British officer, and they have to kind of help figure out not only how to get home, but how to help the French and native population that was still very heavy at the time, because this evil British soldier kind of has a wish to just kind of completely wipe them out. And then the second one is Beyond the Island, where you've got, you know, they return back in history to try to right some other wrongs, I guess you could say. One of the characters kind of misses the past, and they get thrown into some other situations. And then, so that one takes place mainly on the island. And then the third one that is in the planning stages is going to take place mostly at historic Mill Creek, which is about 5 miles towards Sheboygan on the mainland.
Okay.
And the last one that's going to wrap everything together is going to take place at the lighthouse right there by the bridge.
Awesome. Andrew.
Yes.
Did you ever do theater,
beautiful.
sir?
Did I ever what?
Love it.
Did you ever do theater? Because, oh my gosh, you'd be perfect.
Me? Theater?
Improv, especially improv theater. You'd be awesome.
I could do some
That's great.
improv.
Yeah, I'm
Well,
sure.
the lighthouse is right there. See?
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah.
Yep. Love it. I actually get to go up there this weekend. I'm way excited.
Super.
That is going to be a good trip.
Way excited.
Would you consider yourself, I mean, I know you have 2 more books in the works, but would you consider yourself a plotter or a pantser?
I do both. I've got so many books planned out, and in fact, I've got the series that I'm working on, and then I'm working on another young adult book that takes place during the Civil War, kind of everything I teach about the Civil War in story form. But then I'm also wrapping up a way different book that just came to me, and it takes place in the 1920s. And most of it takes place out in the Black Hills. And so it's just a very different perspective, different time period, but I've loved writing and I've loved looking at it. It just kind of came to me. It's extremely loosely based on one of my favorite novels, Pride and Prejudice.
Okay.
But there's a lot of other things that happen and other things that go into it. And there's a little bit of mystery and some intrigue. So there's that as well. So I've got a lot of things thought out. And once I get my ideas and start my research, I'll do the note cards. So I'll have a very, very basic outline in that way. But I mean, I've got scenes for future books that are way in the year. I've got scenes written for those. And then as I'm working, so often, I'm sure you guys have all had this as well, the characters just start telling you what they're going to do instead of you writing it. And so that way, definitely go with it on the seat of my pants and just kind of, okay, this is going to happen. All right, there we go. So.
Okay, Andrew. Andrew's got a black powder musket he's
that
playing
is so
with.
Cool. Oh, that is so cool. And the powder, yes.
Yeah. You're missing the hat though, Andrew. You need the hat to, finish it all off. There you go. There, you got it. Okay, so you write, it sounds like you're drawn more to historic fiction than anything else. Is there a thought for another genre that you might try, or is there a thought for a genre that you would never try?
I feel like I like to write what I know. And I mean, for as long as I can remember, I've been making up stories. So these ones are, a little bit different too with the time travel. It was definitely a different challenge to go with and to do that. And even to go from writing mainly for adults down to writing for, like with this one, the younger grades, middle grades, 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, it's different there. I don't know. I think I like staying in the historic fiction mostly because I love teaching and I can really teach through that. And being a middle school teacher, kids learn way more through stories.
Absolutely. I think we all do.
Absolutely. Whether it's kind of having them tell the story and be a part of the story, or having them read the stories. And so I like staying in that kind of vein. If I went different, it would probably be, I would probably try to reach out and do maybe suspense or mystery or something. I like to read a lot of those. And so I'm definitely trying to start incorporating that a little bit more within the historic lens. But I could also see myself doing a more contemporary, suspense, maybe somewhere down the road. As for ones I wouldn't do, fantasy would be tough. I think I've heard earlier in another conversation with this, the world building would be a lot.
That is the one really good thing about historical fiction is that your world building's already kind of done for you.
A lot of it is, and it's just more bringing it to life.
Yep.
So I think I would probably avoid fantasy just because I'm not sure even where I would go with it or how I would start with it. So we all have different brains with that. So
yeah, well, absolutely.
Yeah.
Anybody else have questions for Marie?
No questions, Your Honor. Reserve the right to recall the witness.
Okay.
Oh. So
You know,
what were your
it's been
primary?
a while since I've been in the same room with Andrew, and I forgot. I just forgot.
Can you keep up? That's all.
Yeah.
So-
Michael, go ahead.
Yeah. What were your sources primarily for the research? And part B, how daunting was it?
So
You can
Looking
answer in either order.
yeah, so my very first book, I was young, like I said, I was in one of my first couple years of college and took on this huge project, and it took me about 8 years to actually go through with it. But I was also getting through college, student teaching, and doing all that. Now it's getting a lot easier to kind of get them. And like I said, I've got so many ideas, whether they're spin-offs or another thing that I do the writing has opened a couple of other avenues for me now. People want me to come and give talks on at their historical societies and things like that. I've done some of that, so that's been awesome. And then I also got asked by an organization called Buy Now Michigan, and I do a monthly article on a Michigan history event or person for them.
Awesome.
So it's like every time I research one of those, I'm like, oh, this guy. So they're like, one of my first ones was on Joe Burley. He is actually from Muskegon originally. My mom grew up as his neighbor, and this guy fought in World War II. And oh my goodness, his story is just incredible. He was, he actually at one point was fighting for the Russians because he was a prisoner and they found him, and until he could go back to his American troops. So, every time I run into, a new article, it can fall into a new story. So there's that too. The research, again, first and foremost, visiting the places. I like to talk to actual historians, get a lot of ideas from there. I'll talk to historic reenactors as well to get some different ideas.
That's a really good source. Yeah.
They know their stuff. They really, really do. And so that's been a really good source. And actually, a lot of historians, even for the National Historic Parks, I've been able to, talk to some of the high up historians just saying, hey, like, for example, when I was writing the Fredericksburg story, I noticed that when I'm doing my research, there's this guy, John Hennessy, who seems to write a lot of articles. And, oh, look, he works for the National Park. So when we were down there, I'm like, hey, I'm writing this book. I want it to be as historically accurate as possible. Do you have any sources or could I meet with you? And he met with me and gave me some sources that aren't even available to the public. And so once
that's very awesome.
Just letting people know that. And my Mackinac books, actually, the fun research part of that is actually for 2 summers, I worked for the Mackinac State Historic Parks.
Very cool.
So I was one of the individuals who would dress up in the colonial costume. I would cook in front of the fire. I probably am in hundreds of people's random vacation pictures because of that. And so that was where I got a lot of my research for Mackinac. The first book, a lot of the things that are said, it basically came also because we would always talk about how cool it would be to go back in time and talk to the people that were portraying. And so that helped develop that story as well. And so I got a lot of research just from living up there. And then once I started to do the other books in it, and as I'm researching the last 2, I'm just talking to some of my contacts up there and getting a lot of information from them as well. I mostly worked at the Colonial Fort on the mainland. I did some work down at Historic Mill Creek. And I worked a couple stints at the lighthouse and at the fort on the island and at the historic houses on the island. So I knew enough basics, but just to get some more information about it was just talking to a lot of those people that I knew.
Right. Is there a specific event in history, American history, or any other event that might take place in the world, a specific historical event that you really want to write about but haven't yet because of time or energy or travel constraints or research, is there one little microcosm of history that you'd really like to dive into?
Actually, yeah, and it's on the very, very, very back burner, but Russian Alaska.
Okay.
So Alaska, back when, there's something about that I do find really fascinating. I've always also wanted to visit Alaska, so I figured that would be a good reason to go do it. And so that's definitely a time period. Like I said, playing around right now, writing, it's actually the first draft is done. 1920s out west. There's so many places out there. I don't know, I think mostly I would stay with American history. There's some fascinating things out in, out in Europe as well that would be kind of fun to play around with, but there's also so much here in American history as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
And like my writer's notebook is just chock full of ideas,
So, are you an analog writer or a digital writer? And I know you talk about a notebook. Do you write longhand when you're drafting your novels, or do you do all that on the computer?
No, I have to write it out by hand first. It's how I work, and then I'll go back and of course type it in, and there's my first round of edits is going from paper to digital. I have to write it down first, and a lot of times when I'm at shows, I'm able to write at that time as well, kind of in between visitors and stuff. I'll be writing, but even just sitting at home, I have to write it all down first. So
excellent. Okay, anybody else with questions? No? Okay.
Still no question. I do have one. Have you ever met with or dealt with the NMLRA?
No.
The National Muzzle Loading Rifle Association out of Friendship, Indiana. And they have a massive primitive section, and they're very period specific. It has a ton of history in it. And there are a lot of people that travel from area to area showing off primitive wares, how things actually work. I know that you've got experience with it. It's just another source of information. It's I used to compete with them long ago.
Cool.
When I was
and actually I know one of my favorite
Go ahead.
I was gonna say one of my absolute favorite shows is the Kalamazoo Living History Show, which it's run by, I think it's a Michigan muzzleloaders organization. And actually I was going to release Beyond the Island there, but it got canceled. I think the date that it was supposed to happen was March 14 and 15, so it got canceled, and so I had to do a digital release on this one. But it's fascinating just to be able to talk. So many people know so much, and you can learn so much just by talking to them.
I think that's one of the big things, because in the primitive section, everything you had to even be there, you had to be in primitive attire, etc.
Yep.
But the stories that were told around the campfire, the things that went back around, there's a lot of history that goes on there, and they post consistent. They have a newsletter that has a lot of historical information inside of it. Not just about weapons, but about the times, and a lot of period vendors that can help you get things like this.
That's awesome. Yeah, I like at that Kalamazoo Living History Show, they'll sell those things, and I'm like, if I could just bring that to school, I could justify buying it, but I don't know. I know I wouldn't be able to bring it at school, but
no. Although I think Tim Allen said it best. This whole thing is a safety. You have to be able to put the right amount of primer in. You have to be able to put the wadding in. You have to be able to ram it down. You have to be able to put a cap on the side. You have to be able to set the trigger and the set trigger. It's not something.
And then
tolerate
the explosion.
That's not too bad, but
well, my husband has one. He actually hunts occasionally with his muzzle loader, and it's loud.
And I was able, when I worked in Mackinac, I was able to shoot one of those, and it does have a little bit of a kick. I was also able to shoot a wall gun, which is pretty much a miniature cannon. That was
Yeah.
interesting.
This one is
So-
very small. This is a small caliber.
Mhm.
I have
Yep.
8 or 10 others that
Wow.
go up in calibers, including a blunderbuss, which if you ever
Oh,
want
nice.
a pirate book, blunderbusses are cool. It's just, here, it's silverware and everything. Okay,
Yep.
now let's fire.
You know, basically whatever you got handy that won't melt.
Put it in
Yeah.
there.
Oh, look, here, let's put this in there. Very impressive.
Okay. Yeah, yeah. So how long does it take you usually, Marie, to
Ooh.
complete a novel? How long I mean, I know that,
Yeah.
you know, the first draft always takes us years. You know, my romance novel took me 14 years. But once you get that first draft done, how long does it take you to go through the editorial process and then go to press?
Usually we can release 1 or 2 a year. I am constantly writing or working every single day. And so I just, even if it's 10 minutes, 15 minutes, I just try to write at least a little bit every day, or edit or do one of those things. And so about a year. And when, like, so I just sent off, you know, my newest one, the Black Hills one, that's off being edited right now. So now I'm working on my next one. So yeah, constantly writing, constantly working, constantly plotting and things like that. So it takes, like, the bigger ones, these ones took about, I'd say probably 14, 15 months. You know, this one was really easy because I already had the research done.
Right.
And so it was really easy to kind of put this one together, and it's a lot smaller as well. And these ones go a little bit quicker because I love it up there. So it's really nice. And, you know, I can't wait to be going up there this weekend. And I'll probably this weekend, it's actually, I get to go to a craft show, guys. Actually, that's where I'm going up there for that. I'm so excited. But I'll probably definitely be writing on that 3rd book because I'm right there.
Right.
So it's going to be really nice to be right there working on it.
So out of all your titles, which is your personal favorite?
So my mom and myself too, I call these my children. It's kind of like picking your favorite child. I usually go with the latest ones. So these two definitely, probably I would consider my favorites right now, just because they're the newer ones. So still new to me too.
Yeah.
Still have a lot of love for each, and I like all of them for different reasons too. And so, you know, there's that too, but probably the latest two, are my 2 favorite.
Yeah, I definitely get that. My latest project is always my current favorite.
Exactly.
The first book I ever wrote.
You
Yeah.
said this was your favorite, and this is the one. I'm so sad now.
When I saw you, I feel like I saw you when I only had a couple.
Yeah, so that one
Yeah.
could have been her favorite at the time.
And it has changed too. It's definitely changed, and I'll go back and forth and back and forth. And that is definitely true too.
Yeah, I think it's true for all of us.
I have an important question. Which of Diana's books is your favorite?
I actually have not gotten around to reading any of them yet.
Okay, which of TL's is your favorite?
Same. I know, I'm really bad.
Okay,
I'm really
so
bad. I tried to,
have you read any of Andrew's?
No, she
I have,
hasn't.
I have not. I read one of your short stories.
Oh, which one?
I can't remember.
I usually recommend either The Statue or Protect His Heart.
Yeah. I
If
can't
it
remember which one it
It
was.
was either scary or it was topical.
It was a scary one.
The scary about the girl at the bar.
I think so. Yeah. Is
Yeah.
that the one that you bring along with you to shows to show people?
I usually have different ones there.
Okay.
I engage people and give them a
Yeah.
short story to make them either smile, cry, laugh, or worse.
Get scared. Yeah.
Yeah,
Throw
get scared
things at
all
you
over.
occasionally. So, Marie, you've got a special coming up with the new release of your book, right? When do you anticipate that release is going to be up?
So my hope is that it will be released in mid-August.
So
That
people
does
can
not-
look for a special on one of your books or many of them when that new
Yeah.
release comes out.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep. So
And
yeah,
then do
mid-August.
you have a
and then-
website where people can find you?
Yeah. Actually, probably I can actually post all that information on the Facebook page. It's a longer website. It's not a quick and easy one.
That's all right. Tell us where it is now, because people are coming back to watch these videos after the fact in recording, and they're going to be on our YouTube channel forever.
Yes, that's true.
Let us know what the website is now so that other people can find you later on.
Yeah. So you basically, and it's kind of, I would love to throw a lot of money into it. But it's a Google site.
That's fine. Just let us know
and
what it is
so-
so we can find you there.
Yeah. So just kind of pulling that up right now. My email is always the best way to get a hold of me. ericamarie84@gmail.com.
Okay.
All the books are available on Amazon as well. But if you see, actually, if you just Google Marie LaPres, the first thing that popped up for me was author Marie LaPres, and that's it.
Okay.
So,
That's
Now-
true.
yeah.
Last question I've got before we have to wrap this up for the night is, tell me about your reason for using a pen name. What made you decide to use a pseudonym, and how did you go about choosing your pseudonym?
Yeah, that was actually really easy. So my full given birth name is Erica Marie, is my first name. LaPres is my middle name. It's my mom's maiden name. And then Emelander is my last name.
Okay.
And so that's my full name. And a lot of times I'll sign my book that way as well. And so when it came to writing, I just wanted something a little bit different. And so I went with that middle part. Plus, Emelander is very long to write out over and over and over again.
Yep. And it's hard
and
for people
so-
to remember when they Google you. So yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, so that's kind of why I went with just the middle part of that name.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. Excellent. Does anybody have any final questions for Marie before we close it out for the night?
No,
Okay.
I was just checking. No.
Yeah, okay. So again, thank you, Marie, for coming tonight. I appreciate
Yes.
it, and I appreciate you being available. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. This is always more fun when we have more people coming out. We are doing this every day for the month of June. We have more authors that we're going to be talking with and exploring their work. You can find us at pagespromotions.com. You can find us on Facebook at 2020. Andrew, find us at Facebook 2020 Virtual Book Festival on Facebook. You can get the book. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, and here's the other one. Da-da-da. Though the war shall rise against me. You can find that. Andrew, can you bring that a little closer so people can see it a little better? There you go. Perfect. So again, we're going to do this all month. Find us on Facebook, find us on Pages Promotions, and who knows, we may do more of these in the future. Thanks everybody for coming. We'll see you tomorrow night.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.